DogWorks Radio is sponsored by Alaska Dog Works. Check out their website at alaskadogworks.com. From First Paw Media, sponsored by Alaska Dog Works Professional Canine Training Center in Anchorage, Alaska. This is DogWorks Radio, committed to families and their dogs to build lifelong and fulfilling relationships. Visit our website at dogworksradio.com. Now, here are your hosts, Robert and Michelle Forto.
Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Robert Forto, and you're listening to DogWorks Radio on KVRF 89.7 in the Mat-Su Valley. Radio Free Palmer.org is our live streaming site. You can hear all of our episodes over on dogworksradio.com. And be sure to follow us on social media by searching DogWorks Radio. And today we're talking to Carrie Brophil. She is a dog trainer and wildlife biologist, and she is going to be part of our team here at Alaska Dog Works, and I'm really excited to have her on. Carrie, how's it going tonight?
Good. It's going great tonight.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. I have a bunch of questions for you, and we're going to jump in, okay?
All right.
So first off, Carrie, as I mentioned, you are a dog trainer. You've been doing this a long time. But my first question to you is, where did you get your start, and how long have you been doing this?
I got my start when I was a little girl in Pennsylvania. So currently this year marks my 31st year of training other people's dogs for them. I started in Pennsylvania. I started when I was young, and I started actually just starting house sitting, and it turned into pet sitting. And I started working on problems when people were away, and they started noticing, and then they started calling me up and hiring me to help fix problems. And I guess it was about 21 years ago or so, I started my official business when I was in college and started dog training on the side then.
So you and I started training at about the same time in the 1990s or so. I guess for folks that are new to the dog training world, what do you think the biggest change in dog training in the last 30 years or so has been?
The techniques. The techniques that were used when I first started training, most of them are not used at all any longer today. The techniques have just gotten better as we've learned more about dogs and learned to understand more about dogs.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that? When you say techniques, obviously you and I know what we're talking about, but for the average pet owner, what does that mean exactly?
Back when I started training, it was common practice, and it was okay to do things like physically punish your dog for every little thing, and that was accepted. That is something that's not accepted any longer. Most training techniques now revolve around positive enforcement and instead of negative enforcement.
Okay. And we're going to jump way into that as we get further down. One of the things you always hear people talking about in the dog training industry, and one of the most common pages on a dog trainer's page, is their personal training philosophy. Do you have one that you can share?
I do. It's my personal philosophy doesn't really fit into any of the categories that you commonly see in the dog training world or on the websites. I train mainly by using science-based, but I also cue in behavioral cues, and working with the wildlife biology side, I actually go a little bit more into the biology and behavioral cues than the domestic world side. So what I do doesn't really quite fit in any area. But then I also look at the whole family unit when I'm training. So not just the dog, any other pets in the household, any kids in the household, any other adults in the household. Everybody is that family unit. So when I'm training, I might be working with one person with the dog initially, but then I always try to bring in the entire family or take a look at the entire household to see how that all works together so that the dog can live in that household and listen in that household.
So as you probably know, Carrie, there's a lot of dog trainers in our industry that have not had any formal training. They aren't they don't have a degree in animal behavior such as you. They may have not taken the certification tests that are offered, but they've learned by trial and error. Can you give a pro and a con of either one of those scenarios, whether they go to school and learn, book knowledge first and then training, or just kind of just jump in and get their feet wet?
Oh, there's pros and cons to everything. When you start out just book learning and schooling and then jump in, the trainers tend to want to do everything by the book and see everything in black and white. Whereas when you are training from experience, you tend to learn the business and the different shades of gray that are always there. So both of them are good, but neither one's better than the other per se, because after some time, the people who jump right in will get the education, and the people who get the education first will get the experience. But there's always those differences. And I see that a lot with young trainers who are just starting out, who went to school first, is everything's black and white, versus the people that have been doing it either naturally or just jump right in because it's interesting to them. They tend to see those shades of gray. And what I'm talking about is when you're trying to help a dog through a through a problem, the shades of gray is how each dog responds slightly different. Each individual, each breed, everybody's going to respond differently to the techniques that you use.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I fully agree with you with that shades of gray. That's where everybody is really struggling, is they think that their dog should be doing XYZ and they're actually doing ABC, and they can't figure out what's happening in the middle. And I think a really good dog trainer can recognize that gray area and jump in and solve the problems. So now that we've got all the technical stuff out of the way, Carrie, let's jump in and have a little fun. I know that you have a couple of dogs. They come from very interesting backgrounds, and you and I have talked about these guys quite a bit. But I'm sure our listeners would like to know, are you involved in any type of dog sports or activities with your dogs where you just really get out there and form that great bond with them?
Well, as far as dog sports right now, I'm not doing anything because I have a young human family. But we do take our dogs everywhere with us as a family group. And so they go hiking, camping, backpacking. I can't stop helping people. So even when we're doing that and I'm with my family, I end up helping people on the trails or helping people in campgrounds or wherever we're at. I'm trying to get into working a little bit more with some of the herding sports. But it's tough, especially right now with all the snow on the ground, but it's tough, just to get in there to start doing it.
Right. And I know that you're a rather recent transplant from North Dakota. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, you got your start in Pennsylvania. What do you think the biggest difference is between those three areas? Of course, up here, there's a lot of outdoor activities. We have the land of the midnight sun in the summertime, and people are out and about all the time. What about the other two areas that you trained? Can you compare and contrast a little bit?
In Pennsylvania, we see a lot more dogs that are just in the houses. That's pretty much all they do, is they come to live with the person in the house, and they don't ever really leave the yards or the houses. And that seems to be common on the East Coast, unless it's a very active family. They just tend to stay at the house. In North Dakota, we noticed I noticed that there was a lot more of farm dogs, so there were a lot more working dogs. They didn't really do sports besides either herding and guarding out there. And then you did have your pet dogs as well, but even those pet dogs, they had jobs, and a lot of them was just to guard the property. They were still part of the family, and people gave them human emotions a lot more. Moving up to Alaska, since there is a lot more outdoor activity out here, people are more active, the dogs are more active, the dogs are more fit up here. I don't see as many overweight dogs, and people tend to treat their dogs as dogs up here and less like a furry child. I guess they don't baby them as much.
So not a lot of costumes are running around up here in Alaska. People dressing their dogs up like Disney characters and the like, right?
Yeah, correct. And you don't see very many designer dogs either, or ones that, people carrying them around often. So. Right.
So let's jump into some of your work in the training field. This isn't a big deal up here, but I know it's a much bigger deal down in the lower 48, where people do a lot of networking. Are you involved at all in any network activities, or do you consult with other trainers and possibly refer clients out?
So I do. I belong to quite a few network groups that are worldwide. The International Association of Behavioral Consultants, the Professional Dog Training Associations, there's a couple other groups, and we do kind of bounce issues off one another if we're having problems. And we're able to contact people one-on-one if we're having an issue and like to talk to somebody that way. Locally, I don't know too many of the other dog trainers or the veterinarians up here, and that's primarily because of COVID, be making it hard to get out and actually meet people. I have, though, referred some people out to other trainers in the area because they called me looking for a service that I didn't offer, or I didn't feel comfortable after hearing what exactly they wanted. I didn't feel comfortable working with that dog. And so I tried to find a different trainer up here that was a little bit more in the area that they were looking for to refer them to.
And for folks that are listening, if you find a trainer that does that type of referring out, you've really found a good one, because this industry is very interesting that way. We typically hold our cards close to our vest, and you will find that there's a lot of competition between dog trainers. So if you find one that can offer a referral, I would take that as gold, because that's a really big deal in our industry. Don't you agree, Carrie?
I do agree, and I think that's something that new trainers need to take to heart, is that you can't be afraid to do that, because that shows that you are able to grow, and you're also able to work with the other people, that your competition.
Right. So next off, what do you believe are the 3 most important things to teach a dog, whether it's a puppy or an adult? What are your 3 things that you make sure every client understands?
I don't know if I could come up with 3. The very first one that I can come up with is to teach your dog that you can be trusted. And I think that was one of the most important things, that dog can trust you, because once you gain that trust, then everything else seems to fall into place eventually. I don't want to say to use any of the cues or commands, because that's up to the person and how they want the dog to act. I really do think that trust would be one of the most important things.
Yeah, everything's built on trust for sure. So next off, Carrie, what cases do you find the most challenging in your work as a trainer?
The cases I find the most challenging are the ones that I like the most. They are the ones that involve either the feral or semi-feral dogs, rescues that have histories, and working with them to fit into their new lifestyle. Very difficult. You have to go a little bit slower. A lot of times you have to pull all the tricks out to get something to work. But it's also the most rewarding whenever it finally clicks and that dog just settles into their new life and starts behaving like a dog, instead of a dog that's extremely scared.
Yeah. Those cases are ones that we always remember. Those really challenging ones, and I find myself telling those stories to peers and other folks that are involved in this industry, because that is truly how we learn is through those challenging cases and how we've arranged a Comic-Con a conclusion. Don't you agree?
Oh, yes. Yeah, every challenging case teaches you something, whether it's something about you or something about your training style, or something teaches you that maybe you didn't know something you thought you did. And so, yeah, they're very rewarding, and honestly, those are my favorite ones to work with.
So next up, what advice would you give to other trainers about working with dogs and their owners? And I ask you this because we have people listening all over the world, and dog training is approached much differently in other areas, not only of this country, but around the world.
So the advice I would offer would be to step back and learn to see the whole picture. Many trainers get so focused on the problem at hand that they forget to look at the whole picture. So the whole environment that the dog is in, everything that's acting together, because a stimuli that might be causing the problem might not be evident until they learn to step back. And then the other thing that I would have to tell them is know when to ask for help. Don't just assume that you know it all, or, that you're always going to be right. Always reserve that little bit and know when to ask for help when you need it. And it's not shown as a weakness. It's shown as actually somebody who has a lot of growth and potential.
And that goes back to what we were talking about, being able to refer out. I think that that really shows growth as a trainer, and of course as a business owner, if that is the way that you go. So next up, Carrie, this may be very broad for you, depending on your work with many dogs in many scenarios and in many areas. You said that you worked in the city, and you've worked in the in the rural areas as well as up here in Alaska. But what is your scariest moment with a dog or a client?
I've had a lot of scary moments. We'll put it out that way. I've been greeted at the door with loaded guns. I've been threatened. I've been bitten many times. But my most scariest moment was I was actually working for a zoo park doing dog training. I was training the gray wolves to be education dogs. And they were going through basic obedience, and the one wasn't quite fitting in, and I was just assessing her behavior as well in this one session to see how much it's changed. And I was going to take her out of the program. And she decided to attack me from behind. So I am lucky that she was very inexperienced. She was about 5 months of age. So I was very lucky that she was inexperienced. I was very lucky I had long hair and I had it in a bun on the base of my neck, because she was going in to actually go for my neck when she jumped me. So needless to say, everything ended up working out and I was able to get out of there. That sealed her fate for not being in the program for an education dog.
Yeah, that could be a scary moment. Were there other zookeepers or trainers around you at the time, or were you there by yourself?
I was in their pen by myself at the time because they knew me. We passed that point where we thought safety-wise that I would be okay. And there were other people around, just not very close by.
Wow.
So it was a very scary situation. And, it was all over in a matter of less than a minute, but still it could have been much worse.
And that's something I'm sure that you keep close by at all times when you're thinking about dogs and their potential. Because even the meekest of house dogs have the ability to kind of flip that switch and bite us and really cause harm if they feel threatened or anything. Is that right?
Oh yes, that's right. I've also been bitten by a dog that's known as being very docile. And he actually bit through my hand, and it was because he was frightened and he was still mourning the death of his owner. Dogs go through a mourning phase just like most other animals. And it was just that fear, and there was a little bit of confinement in there. And looking back, it was like I shouldn't have done what I did, exactly how I did it. And they just react. And you have to remember that not all dog bites are meant to be aggressive or meant to be a bite either. Some of them are just out of reaction.
So next up, Carrie, before we run out of time here, you had mentioned that you've been doing this a long time, 31 years, and I know with about that same amount of experience myself, I could probably tick off 100 things here. But if you had to pick the top 2 or 3 things you've learned as a trainer, what would those be?
Some of the things that I've learned as a trainer are the same things that I suggest that other trainers keep in mind. And one of them is that, you can't be too afraid to ask for help when you need it. The very first time I asked a different trainer for help in person was very hard for me. Because you have that idea in your head that I can do this, I don't need any help. And sometimes you just hit that wall, and you really have to learn how to ask for help and when you need it. And then the other thing is just being not afraid to learn, the methods, like we stated earlier, the methods that I used 30 years ago. Well, I didn't use them. The methods that were accepted 30 years ago aren't the same methods that are accepted now. And, the education never stops. You continue the education all the time because the field is evolving. And so I had to keep reminding myself that I do have to keep up with it. It's not something that I can just say, oh, I learned that, now I can do the job. It's something that I have to say, I learned that, but now I'm going to continue to learn so I can keep doing the job better.
So the next one is probably a little bit of thinking in the past because, like you said, we're in the middle of COVID now, and it's really stopped the world as we know it in terms of networking with other trainers and whatnot, at least in person. But that is, what is the last training seminar you attended? And if it was an online type deal like a workshop, what was that? And maybe what did you learn?
I'm actually just halfway through a seminar right now. Because of COVID, a lot of them are virtual and a lot of them are being recorded. So, which is nice because I can still attend them, but I can watch them when I have time. And if something comes up, like I said, I have young kids. So if something comes up, I can stop it and then go back a little bit later and finish it. The one I'm in the middle of right now is by Turid Rugas, I think is how you say her name. She is Norwegian. She has different training methods that are completely positive, that don't require like leashes or anything. And I find that amazing that she can do some of the stuff she's doing. And then I just finished another seminar from Dr. Ian Dunbar. And that one was actually just on business development. It was an older seminar that he had reposted online.
Yeah, so, he's one of the best. I remember learning from his seminars and his books, which happens to be the next question coming up. But some of those old school old school trainers. You may not agree with their methods or their training techniques, but as they say, we learn from our history, and you can really learn from those guys that go way back, can't you?
Yes, yeah, and he's actually one of the people I think I first read his book way back when before internet.
Yeah.
And it's still a lot of things are still relevant.
Which parlays us right into the next question. Are there any specific books, authors, DVDs, streaming services nowadays that you follow, or you're really heavily influenced as a trainer?
Heavily influenced. My personal philosophy kind of matches with some of the Eastern European philosophies in dog training, and I've been doing that a lot lately, is looking at some of the expert dog trainers from Norway and Sweden and reading about their techniques and some of the training books that they have. And a lot of them you can buy through DogWise, which is I think that's the Association of Professional Dog Training. It's one of their publishing companies.
Yeah, they have a lot of great books and DVDs and stuff through there for sure.
And yeah, so I've just been looking through there and finally, some of the personal things that I've always felt are now coming to light in the dog training world. And so to me, just being able to read from other dog trainers that have these similar philosophies that were able to get it down in a book is very reassuring to me. So they still influence me. And then one of the books that really influenced me is just called Dog Language, and it's a very old book. I think I forget what language it's written in initially. But in the 80s or 70s, it was transcribed into English, and it just talks about dog language.
Yeah.
And it was very early work, but it's extremely relevant, and it's that book is one of my favorites.
We talked a couple of nights ago on our Facebook Live, and you were our guest, and that was one of the things you really wanted to hit home, was the importance of understanding body language, not only as a trainer, but also as an owner. And I think people would have a much better relationship with their dogs if they had a firm grasp on what their dog was telling them, because that's how they're speaking to us. They're telling us and giving us cues by the way that they are interacting and reacting to their environment. You agree?
Oh, I agree. I tell people that all the time, that the dogs always tell you what they are going to do before they do it. We just need to understand how to listen to them so that we know.
Right.
So, and they do that through, like you said, body language, expressions, very subtle, but they always tell us.
So, guys that are listening, that is the takeaway from this show. The dog will always tell us before they do something. And, if people were that way, I think we would have a much different relationship with our human counterparts. But unfortunately, a lot of us do not communicate that way. So, very interesting how dogs let us know what's happening. Carrie, before we go, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, I mean, if you're looking for a trainer, don't be afraid to ask questions. We're not afraid to answer them. So, and find somebody who follows what you think, should be going on and can really help you. And we're here to educate. We're here to educate, help, and help your dog live with you as a family member.
Great advice, for sure. Carrie, how can folks find you online, and if they're interested in learning more about you, where is the best place to reach you?
Online, I can be reached through my Facebook page. There's one, just my personal page under Carrie Brophil, and then my personal business is Moondog. So Moondog Consulting and Services is on Facebook as well. And I do have a website, which is moon-dog.org.
Very good.
That people can.
Carrie, thank you very much for joining us tonight here on the podcast, DogWorks Radio, and we'll talk again soon, okay?
Alrighty, thank you very much.
All right. On behalf of my guest today, Carrie Brophil, this is Robert Forto for DogWorks Radio. Be sure to check us out on social media at DogWorks Radio. You can follow us on any platform, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you're searching, you will find us. Until next time, goodbye.
From First Paw Media, this is DogWorks Radio. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we invite you to subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll find a link on the episode notes. You can tap or swipe on the episode cover art, and you'll see some offers from our sponsors. You can support our show by supporting them. If you like what you have heard, we would love it if you could give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe too. Your hosts are Robert and Michelle Forto. Our producer is Robert Forto and created for First Paw Media.